Welcome, everyone, to Talia Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast, where we dive deep into the realms of confidence and assertiveness with our co-host, Talia Bombola. As a licensed marriage and family therapist and specialist in confidence and assertiveness, Talia brings a wealth of expertise and insights to our discussions. Join us each Tuesday as we explore practical strategies, personal anecdotes, and empowering advice to help you cultivate the confidence and assertiveness you need to thrive in all aspects of life. Get ready to unlock your full potential and build the life you desire with Talia and Jason as your guides.
Good morning. What's happening, you guys? As you come in, say hello, tell me where you're from. Usually we do this on my walk, but it's raining and I don't feel like walking today. Hit me with your questions in the chat. Happy to answer anything that you got for me. What does a man mean when he says he isn't falling in love with you? I don't think it gets any clearer than that statement. We have to learn to take people at their word. So if they make a statement that's cold, that's a cold statement. That hurts. We don't want to hear that. Doesn't feel good. But what it brings up for you and why you're asking that question is you think there's something you can do to change his mind. You've probably spent a lifetime in that place of being a little more anxious in relationships, maybe a little codependent, potentially. Again, I don't know you. I'm going based off of a statement. But that type of statement usually means I'm going to abandon myself and try harder. I'm going to double down on this, and you are going to love me. You are going to fall in love with me because my love is so great, and I see all the brokenness inside of you, and I can fix and change you. I can make you better. I can make you different. Me being around you, me being in your life is going to improve you in so many different ways. Or you have this place of you feel like a sense of ownership that if I leave this person, if I hold my boundaries here, then they're going to fall apart without me because they need me, because they're so broken and only I can help them. And so you really have to have an honest conversation with yourself about that relationship and what that actually means to you. Probably doesn't feel good. Somebody makes that statement, that hurts. That's not somebody I would spend any more time with. Next question. I want to know the difference between FA and DA. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go out and get the book, The New Rules of Attachment by Dr. Judy Ho. She focuses on the 4 main attachment styles: anxious, avoidant, disorganized, and secure. That is all you need to know in your world. We've gotten, and you can go to episode 67 of the Blueprint Podcast where I speak with the author about the new rules of attachment. And we actually have that conversation of how diluted the information has become regarding attachment styles. Everybody nowadays wants a certain amount of information because it's going to make them feel like an expert, like they're a pseudo psychologist, that they get to go out in the world and diagnose people and give them all these labels and do all these things and make you feel a certain way so that you can feel stronger about yourself by having this label for yourself. But that label is often going to be self-limiting in a lot of ways. It's helpful in the beginning to understand behaviors that you have, behaviors that you go out into the world with, and the way that you interact with other people, the way that you treat yourself, the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you talk to other people, the language that you use. Those labels are useful in identifying the behaviors that keep you stuck or that you don't like. FADA doesn't matter. Avoidant, secure, disorganized, anxious, right? And so we want to stick with those. You don't have to. You can read all the other books. I've got them back here. You can read all the other books and learn about all the subcategories for attachment styles. Those are used when looking at different research subjects based on age is how they use those categories. So you can look at that and you can use that and you can see if it's useful to you. But in the real world, you want to get a book like The New Rules of Attachment. I'm not affiliated with it. I do know Judy, but the book is awesome. She also wrote the book Stop Self-Sabotage. And so when you pair those 2 books together, if you're an FA or a DA or whatever your insecure attachment style is, you're going to realize very quickly when you combine these 2 books, now you have some actionable tools that you can use in real time to help you navigate the situations in your life that sometimes you just don't like. You don't like what you're experiencing. And we have a hard time using our discernment and our judgment. And for me to say no or to set a boundary with other people because that's my attachment style. That's just who I am, and this is just how it is, and I can't change because I'm a dismissive avoidant. I'm an anxious preoccupied. I'm all of these things. And I want to ask you, how is that label serving you in your life right now, in this moment? When you label yourself, how does that make you feel? When you figure out what the definition of those things are, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel empowered? Or does it make you feel less than? My guess is that it makes you feel less than. So again, when we look at labels that we want to assign to ourselves, use them like on the periphery. There's something that's going on. I need a definition for it. What's happening right now? Yes, some of those things in that definition are definitely what I'm going through in this moment, but it's related to interpersonal relationships. It's related to behaviors. It's related to reaction. It's related to response to external stimuli that's going on in your environment. So when you can recognize these things, now all of a sudden you can change the language that you're using about it. I feel anxious in this moment. I have feelings of anxiousness in this moment. Why do I have feelings of anxiousness in this moment? That addition of in this moment makes it temporary. It's transient. It's fleeting. It's short-lived. It's not going to be with you forever. It doesn't have to be. But how you relate to your environment and the people around you matters. The language that you use with yourself matters. The language that you use with yourself to describe yourself to other people in your environment matters. So I'd be cautious about the labels that you take on. And if they're beneficial for you and you find some sort of like happiness or growth or development or self-improvement because you've assigned yourself a particular label, good for you. I unsubscribe to all labels. For me, they're not beneficial. They're helpful in the beginning when you're going through a personal development or self-improvement journey to be able to understand what's happening in your life, what's going on, to give language to things that you didn't have language for before. And trust me, I was there too, where it's, I'm going to take on all these labels, I'm all these things, and this is just who I am, and this is just how it is, and I can't change, I can't be any different, this is who I am. You're going to live a very long life of this is just who I am as an excuse to stay small, as an excuse to be mean, as an excuse to step back and step away from other people and relationships and things that could really make you feel happy, empowered, confident, competent, empowered, right? And that's really what we want to get to. Says, this is something I really need to work on. I literally can't fathom the concept of self-love. Yeah, self-love is one of those things that we talk about, and it sounds like it's this really big, ambiguous thing. It's not. Self-love is you making yourself a priority each and every day. Self-love is you filling your cups physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually each day. It's having habits and practices that are going to benefit you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually each day, and then being consistent with those practices. Now, my practices are going to look different than yours. For me, I like breath work. I like getting out and rucking with 30 pounds or more on my back, going for 6 to 12 miles a day. I really enjoy that. That makes me happy. It's also a self-regulating process by doing that. So breath work for me is great. I love meditation. I love getting out with my rucksack and spending hours out in nature, getting vitamin D from the sun and enjoying my time. But it might look different for you. There might be something else that you enjoy, but really what it comes down to is you making yourself a priority physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And everybody today, this is what I'm noticing. I'm noticing it with my coaching clients. I'm noticing it out in the real world. I'm noticing it in the comment section. Everybody loves their label. I got to have a label. I have to have a mental illness. If I don't have a mental illness, then I'm not normal. I'm not like everybody else, because everybody I know has some sort of mental illness. They have some sort of issue that's going on, and that's what they identify with. And then they mark themselves with all these circumstances of their life and their problems and their issues and the things that they're angry about and resentful. And it's filled with all this negativity because I am my labels. No, you can actually unsubscribe. I'm not my labels. These labels are helpful in a moment to help me understand who I am, where I'm going, what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it. It's also helpful in me to author my story, that past perspective, to gain perspective on the past so that you can move forward in your life by moving beyond those past experiences. Yes, the label is the data that informs the opportunity to work on, to do the work on you. So when we get into attachment styles, guys, this is probably the book that I would recommend most. It's The New Rules of Attachment by Dr. Judy Ho. And it goes into how to heal your relationships, reparent your inner child, and secure your life vision. And this is in alignment with everything that I create in terms of the videos and all the programs that I've created inside of Kajabi for you guys to create a more secure attachment style. She's been on the podcast, episode 67 of the Blueprint Podcast. Make sure you rate and review the show. We're at 77,000 downloads on the podcast. We can do better. I've had the holistic psychologist on. I've had the angry therapist on. I've had Jessica Baum, author of Anxiously Attached. I've had Judy Ho, author of The New Rules of Attachment. I've had Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald, author of Unbroken, The Trauma Response is Never Wrong. I've had Dr. Robert Glover, author of No More Mr. Nice Guy. I'm really dependent upon you guys to, one, go listen to the Blueprint Podcast, and then two, make sure that you rate and review the show after you listen on Apple and Spotify. When you do that, it helps me gain access to search. When people are looking for a podcast or suggested through Apple, those reviews help. And right now I'm sitting at 2 reviews. So check out the podcast, rate and review it, and I'd really appreciate it if you would. Jackie says, I feel insecure about myself and compare myself to everyone. The question for that is why? Why do you feel insecure about yourself? And that's a great opportunity to journal, to grab a sheet of paper and a pen and just start writing some things down. You can make it in a list format. You can do it as free writing, spend 15 minutes and just write out all the reasons or the thoughts, feelings, and emotions associated with feeling insecure. I know for me, that was a struggle. I started with the Daily Stoic Journal. For me, this is what I did. So the 2 brown ones are journals. That's a year's worth of journaling in each one. And then the one in the center is the Daily Stoic. And so for journaling for me, this is 366 meditations on wisdom, perseverance, and the art of living. That's by Ryan Holiday. And it's the Daily Stoic. Now the companion books to that these are the same thing, right? These are just journals that you can write in. And so it's got all my writings for an entire year. I did that every day for 2 years. And then on the inside of the book, you can see how it's set up, where that's going to be from like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and other philosophers of the time. And then down below that is the author's explanation and anecdotal story that goes along with the ancient philosopher. Then you come over to the brown book, you open it up, and it gives you a journal prompt. Journal prompt for April 8th is, what bad assumptions, habits, or advice have I accepted? What bad assumptions, habits, or advice have I accepted? And of course, all of us can come up with 1,000,001 different things based off of that prompt on our own experiences. And then in that, you have a day and an evening. So day and evening that you can write in your reflection. So a morning reflection and an evening reflection based off of the prompt. What bad assumptions, habits, or advice have I accepted? And what this does is it allows you to really gain mastery and control over your thoughts. You start to identify, well, what you truly believe in, what you think about, what makes you operate the way that you do in the world. And you start to know yourself, which Stoicism, that's really the whole point, is know thyself. You have to get to the point where you know you, and you're so good with you that when people present you with things that you're an asshole, or you're ridiculous, you're so stupid, you're a ridiculous person, when they say these things to you, you can actually step back because you know yourself and you're like, okay, if I'm an asshole, let me step back for a second and evaluate, what am I doing right now? Am I being an asshole? Maybe. And so you step back, you evaluate the situation, you And you can come back with, no, actually, I can see how you might feel that way because you don't live in my head. You don't know my intention. You don't know my thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And from your perspective, based off of the limited information that you have, I can see how you would get there. If I'm giving you some sort of response or criticism based off of some sort of performance or something that you're doing or not doing, people are going to get defensive and they're going to say mean things because they're not thinking at that level. So for you, you get to accept and say, you know what, I'm actually going to challenge this. I'm going to give this back to you. I am being straightforward. I am saying this with love. You don't have to have your reality denied by other people. You determine your reality. And so my reality in that moment is, guess what? Yeah, I'm not being an asshole. You don't have enough information to even make that determination to begin with, but I can see how you would get there. I can see that. I acknowledge and recognize that that feeling for you is valid. I'm just not going to subscribe to it. However, there are times maybe you are being an asshole. Maybe you weren't in control of your emotions. Maybe something did trigger you and you reacted and it was this core response and now you feel bad for it and you should apologize in that moment. You should be able to recognize, hey, you know what? You're absolutely right. That what I said was uncalled for. That was inappropriate and I apologize. And you say that and you mean it. You always get to challenge what people give to you. You don't have to personalize it. You don't have to make it a part of your DNA. You don't have to sit there and be like, oh my God, so-and-so called me an asshole, and now I'm an asshole for the rest of my life for the next 75 years. Oh God. No, it's not how that works. And most people, when they say things, they mean it in the moment. They don't mean it 5 minutes from now. They don't mean it an hour from now. They don't mean it 2 months from now. When you understand that about people, you look at them differently, you treat them differently, you operate differently, you have a greater understanding. Now, sometimes that greater understanding also comes with a lot of problems because now you're making excuses for the other person, for their behavior. And we don't want to make excuses. We want to acknowledge what is and is not for us. So when somebody presents you with something that you don't like and you don't appreciate, then you get to move away from that. Do I have a link or something for on your accounts page for different books? Yeah, there's a book list in my Stan store. And then for those of you who don't know, I have a 6-week program coming up with some of your favorite people called On Attachment. It's a 6-week series of group coaching with people like Dr. Judy Ho, who wrote The New Rules of Attachment, Essen Pinarli. She's attachment somatic practitioner. She's a licensed clinical social worker. We got Dr. Tara Lynn, who's been on every news station known to man. We have Jessica Baum, author of Anxiously Attached. We have Sabrina Zohar of Do the Work podcast. We've got Talia Bombola, licensed marriage and family therapist. We got Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald, author of Unbroken, The Trauma Response is Never Wrong. We've got Ricky Kloos, author of Anxious Heart's Guide. And that's going to be 6 weeks of coaching with all those people. So if you're interested in that and you want to sign up for it, you can go to the link in my bio and go check it out. New Rules of Attachment. Go check that out. Go get it. It's a great book. Stop labeling yourself. Get over that. Your labels are unhelpful. I know we live in a society right now where everybody needs to have a label or you're just not cool. If I don't label myself, I'm not cool, guys. I'm not cool. I have to have 5 mental health disorders in order to be cool with my friends. You don't. A lot of things you can challenge, and I'm not saying that these things aren't real. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you get to challenge the labels that you give to yourself, and I think that's hugely important to the quality of life that you will live. The more labels you accept without challenging them, without understanding them fully and completely, without understanding how it impacts your life physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, don't live your life like that. Get curious. Self-educate. Allow yourself to read some books. Take notes. Understand what you're reading. Make sure you have full or fairly good comprehension over the topic and the subject. Care for yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Put the effort into you. Stop worrying about what other people are thinking and feeling. And that's not narcissism. It's just you are not in charge of what other people are doing with their lives. And so you'll hear me make this quote all the time. It's not your job to fix or change people just so you can like them. It's not your job to fix or change people just so you can like them. And that's often the reality of someone who has an anxious attachment style. You're constantly trying to fix or change the other person because they're the right amount of broken for you. And you think that if I can change them, if I can get them to do all these things, then I'll be worthy of love. Then I'll get my needs met. Then all this stuff is going to happen. And it doesn't. You end up living out a pattern that's been going on your entire life, and you haven't been awakened to it yet. To be able to acknowledge that's the pattern. You choose people that don't actively choose you. That's the problem. You choose people that don't actively choose you. And when you look at your past experiences, it always goes back to childhood and the experiences you had, your family, with your caregivers, with your early friend group, with your first relationship, romantic relationships. And you can begin to go back and reauthor that story with the language you have now and say, no, that was actually dysfunctional. No, that actually wasn't helpful to me. No, that actually caused me to have all these other thoughts, feelings, and emotions that made me feel insecure about myself, even though I was heading in a direction where I was a student athlete and I was taking care of myself and I was doing all these things, but I got around the wrong people, and those people made me feel deeply insecure. And maybe I became a little codependent. Maybe I was anxious. Maybe it caused me to turn more avoidant, and I pulled away from everybody and self-isolated. There's all these potentials that could have happened. Again, I don't know your life, so you have to choose how you author that story and select the words that resonate most with you and your experiences. But I can tell you that's probably the biggest challenge that so many of us face, is looking back at our past, using the language we have today because we've self-educated, right? We've done personal development, you've done some therapy, you know some things, but to go back and honor what those experiences actually were. Oh, I had a great childhood. Nothing ever happened. It was just leave it to Beaver. Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was, unless it was, and you have a secure attachment and high five, good job, that's wonderful. But generally when people say that, they're completely ignoring, there's this veil over your eyes of being able to acknowledge that, yeah, you know what, actually, Dad was checked out. Dad really wasn't around. Dad worked a lot. Dad was very frustrated a lot of the time, and that caused me to feel insecure around Dad. And Mom was completely detached, and she was in her own world, and she dissociated a lot, and I was left alone. I sat and played by myself and lived in a fantasy world myself and learned to dissociate in order to take care of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that I was experiencing as a 5-year-old child. These are very similar experiences that many of you are having or have had. And the greatest gift you'll ever gift to yourself is you. You start to know you. You understand you. You know who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. You give yourself back that empowerment. You take your power back away from the things that took it away from you. That's what we do. That's what this account is all about. That's why I created the 21-day self-love challenge. That's why I asked all of these amazing people to be a part of 6 weeks of coaching starting in June. You don't get access to these people in any place else. I have never seen them anyplace else, all in one spot, all together. It doesn't happen. This is something that I created. This is something I cultivated. These are the relationships that I've built over time with being a content creator. And I'm so excited to be able to bring this to you, but you got to sign up. You got to go to the link in my bio. There's limited spots available. If you want to have direct interaction with some of your favorite authors and podcasters, then I would go sign up. Don't wait. Don't sit on this. There's only so many people that I can have in a Zoom webinar. There's only so many people, and this is going to be 6 weeks of coaching. So if you have an insecure attachment style and you want to talk to the experts and you want to gain some real knowledge and skills on how to build the tools of resilience in your life, then that program is going to be for you, and we start in June. And you can go to the link in my bio and check that out. Amazing to hear it spoken. Years of work, no one ever spoke so directly of it. Thank you. You're welcome. And I think people do speak of it directly. It's just we're not always willing to hear it. And maybe right now you're in a place where you're like, yeah, you know what, that actually just really resonated with me. That makes a lot of sense to my experience. But there is a whole other side of TikTok, and it's the piece that I'm not really a fan of. I see all these different coaches, and they're playing off your pain. They give you a 2-minute video on how to deal with the dismissive avoidant, how to work through all the things with an anxious preoccupied, how to understand your avoidant partner. And it's what that's doing is feeding off, it's literally like a leech just feeding off your pain. And we get to this place where it's no, you don't get rid of the labels. You don't like a behavior. That person that you're calling dismissive avoidant or whatever, you don't like their behavior and you're not setting a boundary. You're not setting a boundary with them and you're not doing it with yourself. You're not acknowledging what you like and you're not acknowledging what you dislike. You don't know who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, or why you're doing it. And so you have to answer those questions. Who are you? Where are you going? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What's going on in this relationship? Why don't I like these behaviors? What's happening right now? What does this remind me of? How can I navigate through this? Do I actually want to be with this person? Why am I pushing through trying to be with somebody that isn't giving me what I need in a relationship? Why am I abandoning myself to such a degree that I feel like I'm losing myself in this relationship? And so we want to get very clear on those experiences and what's happening internally in that process. It doesn't matter if they're a dismissive avoid. It doesn't matter if they're avoid. It doesn't matter what their attachment style is. They have behavior that you don't like. It's that simple. You don't like the behavior. Cool. Name the behavior. What is it that you don't like? Begin to understand that. Then, what does that behavior bring up for you? Oh, I don't like that either. That doesn't feel good. Great. Where's that behavior? Where's that feeling come from? How old are you in that moment? What are you experiencing? What's happening inside of your body when you experience that with this person that you're dating? What's going on? Can you acknowledge that you just don't like the behavior? It's not in alignment with your goals, your values, and your standards for a relationship with you, but you tolerate it. Why are you tolerating it? It's because you're afraid to stand up for yourself and make yourself a priority and let people know that, yeah, actually, I do have boundaries. Actually, yeah, I do care for myself. Actually, yeah, I do have goals, values, and standards. And I live up to my goals, my values, and my standards. And I'm not going to abandon my goals, my values, and my standards for you. I'm actually going to live inside of that. And when you're in integrity with your goals, your values, and your standards, you tolerate less shit. People will present you with things and you'll sit back and be like, no, like, we can have a conversation. Hey, you know what? Somebody gives you something. You get to say, hey, yeah, what did you mean by that? You get to question it because you're so good with you, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You are so good with you that when somebody gives you something, you're like, okay, where's that coming from? What's happening right now? Why is that your response? Why are you reacting that way? Why do you think that way? And you get curious. You get curious about the other person, but you also recognize it's not your job to fix or change them. It's not your job to play therapist. It's not your job to play coach. It's not your job to play parent to your partner or whoever you're trying to date or anybody in your life. That's not your job. Your job is to love them as they are without trying to change them. So if you can appreciate people for who they are and who they're showing up as, acknowledging that they have a limited emotional capacity or physical capacity for emotion, and you can still befriend them, be kind to them, understand where they are, know that's where they are, and that it's probably not going to change if they're not doing the work on themselves. But it's not your job to try and change that. And I think that's where a lot of us struggle in our relationships. We hook up with people for superficial reasons because, oh, they look good or they're tall or they're pretty or they're cute and they dress well and whatever it is. And then you get stuck with them because you went based off looks without looking at the whole picture, and you were painting a story in your mind about a relationship that really wasn't real at the end of the day. And it's because you were living in a story and not looking at the person as they really are. And that's hard. To be able to look at the person that you're with and be like, man, you're not perfect. Actually, you make a lot of mistakes. Actually, you've done some things that have been pretty hurtful. It's hard to admit that to ourselves. It's so much easier to blame ourselves. Well, I did that. I should have acted differently. I should have said something different. I should have done something different. I should have. But it takes two, right? So, yeah, maybe you could have done something different, but they could too. And they should. So you have to recognize that communication is important in relationships to the degree that you're able to understand each other. Can you get your point across to somebody who has a limited emotional capacity? They're not stupid, but they're not speaking the same language as you. especially if you've gone to therapy, if you've read books, if you have a really good handle and understanding of this type of information, and you're dating somebody that's never read these types of books, they don't know any, you're going to be miles ahead of them in that game. And so you have to be able to speak to people in the language that they're speaking to you. And with that comes great understanding. Yeah, my therapist told me last week I need to stop blaming myself for everything. Yes and no, right? So there's things that happen in our life that you have to take accountability for. You make decisions. You have discernment. You go out in the world and you do things each and every day. Some things are great, some things are good, and some things can be hurtful to others, and you don't necessarily recognize it because you're working more from a subconscious pattern. That's our core beliefs, our habits, the way that we interact with the world, the way we create and cultivate interpersonal relationships. It's something that's subconscious. We don't always know that we're acting or being in a certain way. So yeah, you don't need to take the blame for everything, but you do have to take ownership for your part. And so that needs to be clear, that you have to take ownership of your part. And when you're able to do that, you begin to see yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually as you truly are. And with that comes grace. You learn to give yourself grace because you have understanding. You recognize, you know what? That was an old pattern. I'm really sorry. And you apologize to yourself. You look back on it and you're just like, yeah, that came from a place of, man, that's a memory from when I was like 9 years old and I had this experience and I didn't feel like I was heard. And then I started trying to figure things out. I would chase people and try to get them to acknowledge me and whatever it is for you, but take ownership of your experiences to some degree. And with that comes power. You take your power back from other people. And that's super important if you can do that. And also that statement is going to, what you just gave me, I'm sure there's more context to that in your experience, and that's 100% valid for you. So yes, but also we have to look at how much ownership can we take. Yeah, heal for sure. Thank you for all the likes. I appreciate it. Kevin says, love your stuff, brother. Been following for a long time. Thank you. Well, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate you, man. Garrett says, broke up with my ex a month ago. Now she is hanging with my friends behind my back. What do I do? So this is an issue when you have mutual friends, and it's always a question of were you all friends prior before dating, or is this literally just your friend group and now she's infiltrated the friend group and hanging out with them? The other part of this is if they weren't all friends to begin with and this was like an introduction and they became friends only through dating you, then that's a conversation you have to have with your buddies. And ask them, why are you guys hanging out with her? That's an ex. And they're free to do whatever they want, but to get an understanding of, well, why are you doing that? You know I'm hurting. You know I'm going through stuff. You know that I didn't want the breakup. You know that I'm having a hard time with this, and you're spending time with her. Are you going to date her now? So you got to look at your buddies and the type of people that you hang out with and figure out what's happening with that and why they're doing what they're doing. She hardly knew them prior, and once we broke up, she took more action. Yeah, again, it takes two, man. We can't put blame on your friends. Everybody's doing this. They're all consensual adults, and they get to make their decisions, but you get to assess if what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for you. What are your goals, your values, and your standards for a relationship with you, including your friendship group? If your friends are doing this and they're actively doing it, is that beneficial? Do you like that? Does that make you feel bad? Does that make you feel like you have to have a conversation with them? Are you angry? Because it's okay to go to your friends and be like, hey guys, we literally just broke up. It would be great if we could have some downtime here where you're not hanging out with my ex. That would be wonderful. But again, if they were friends prior and they knew each other, just is what it is, man. It is what it is. I don't have friends like that, but it's also an age thing. So when you're in your 20s, that's going to be more likely to happen because everybody's going to the bar, they're hanging out, they're doing whatever. And that's just the age group, right? Because you're all in the same place at the same time, doing the same things in the same places all the time. So people in college, people just out of college, they go through that. Adults later in life, we don't go through that. That's not something that happens. And if it does, there's a straightforward conversation. But yeah, evaluate your friends, man. and evaluate what you're okay with. I can tell you my friends wouldn't do that. Unless there was a business relationship. Business relationships are different, especially if they're in the content creation space. Like, we're all in the same space doing the same thing, having the same types of conversations. So it's likely that those types of relationships would be maintained. Speaking to a man, instantly connected, great convo. He withdrew to text. Not sure what you're meaning here exactly. So you started speaking to somebody, you instantly connected, and then I'm assuming there was a pull away, and now you only text each other. You're not meeting back up again. Is that the issue? Yeah, set a date. Set a date. It's okay to set the date. If you want something from somebody, you have to tell them what you want. Here's the thing. I'm very straightforward. I'm not going to sit here and wonder what somebody's thinking or what's going on or what's happening, and just say, look, I like you. I would like to see more of you. If you're not into that or you're not capable of doing that, then I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to go live my life. I'm going to continue on. I'm not going to live in this paused spot that you live in, because I'm growing, I'm developing, I'm living my life, I'm having fun, I'm doing what I want to do when I want to do it, how I want to do it. And you can be a part of that. And so you have to ask yourself, is, again, goals, values, and standards for a relationship, is this all okay with you? And if it's not okay, then you got to put your foot down and just tell them, look, I appreciate you, I care about you, I'd like to spend more time with you, but if you don't have that ability or that capacity, then I'm going to find somebody that can do that. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's putting somebody on notice. And a lot of times, we don't talk to people like that. And when we do, they get defensive. They're like, oh my God, you're such a whatever. And it's, no, you can't make a commitment. You are the problem here. I'm prepared to make a commitment. I'm prepared to be monogamous. I'm prepared to be in a relationship. I'm prepared to do all of these things. You are not prepared to be in this relationship with me. Okay, great. Just wanted to confirm I reacted accordingly. Of course you reacted accordingly. As long as you are in integrity with what you want, with who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. And you can acknowledge that, yeah, this person probably isn't going to change or do anything different. Then you move on with your life and you do your thing. Now, it's not to say 6 months from now they come back and say, you know what, yeah, I'm prepared. 6 months, you can have a different conversation, right? There's no guarantee that, one, you're going to be available, and two, you want to give it a second chance. But sometimes people do get emotionally overwhelmed in the moment. They don't know how to handle it. And then 6 months later, they're just like, man, I made a huge mistake because of my own inability to connect. And that can be hard. But when we hold people accountable, when we tell people what we want and they withdraw, that's actually a really good thing. It doesn't sound like a good thing, but it's a really good thing because it puts the other person on notice that their behavior and current relationships aren't working out so well for them, and they have to rethink what they're doing. Yeah, you'll meet more people that you connect with. You will. You will. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult, especially if you're in a smaller town. That can be really difficult to find the relationships that you want. But it's better to be alone than to be in a pseudo relationship or a situationship. It's better to be alone. What I find a lot of women do, especially after the age of 35, and this is no shade on women over the age of 35, it's just something I've noticed with my coaching clients, is they settle. And they know that they're settling, but the statement they make is that I'm afraid to be alone. I'm afraid this is the best I can do. And it's like, that statement right there, it's the best I can do. I'm afraid it's the best I can do because I deserve better, but it's the best I can do. You need to rethink yourself, who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. Those statements are damaging to yourself, first off, but also damaging to the people that you're spending time with, because you're stopping them. They love you. They care about you. They want to be with you. They're giving you their all. They're giving everything to you. And you're sitting there going, I just feel like I could do better. I feel like there's more out there for me, but I'm afraid to let this go because what if this is the best I can do? You are not a good person when you do stuff like that. You're literally holding on to somebody on a false promise because you're afraid to be alone, or you think it's the best you can do, which means you think you could do better. And if you think you could do better, then you need to release the people that you're dating. If you don't like them enough to be with them and to admire them and to love them and to care for them, you're the problem. And you need to get away from doing those types of relationships like that. It's cruel, it's insensitive, it's selfish. Don't be selfish. Let those people find what's meant for them. And in turn, by you living in integrity with yourself, you'll be more open to finding what you're actually looking for. It's such a horrible statement. What if this is the best I can do? Get out of here, man. You're welcome. I'm having trouble moving on because I don't trust anyone. You were cheated on the entirety of your marriage. Yeah, that's hard. That's really hard. No, you're good. You're good. I get it. So you were cheated on the entirety of your marriage, which makes it feel like it was based on a complete fabricated lie. And depending on how many years that goes on for, it really impacts your self-esteem, your self-image, who you are, who you've been, what you thought your life was. So I can hear you when you say that. 18 years is certainly a long time to go through that experience. When it comes to these types of things, I would encourage you to talk to a therapist or a counselor, because 18 years is a long time. And to know that was going on, I'm sure there were probably moments where you knew it. Maybe you even talked about it and you tried to work through it, but were unable to do so. And that's really where a therapist or a counselor is going to be more beneficial to you. You started therapy recently. It's wonderful. I love that. I think that's really great. I would encourage you to join my 6 weeks of group coaching with people like Dr. Judy Ho. I would encourage you to get involved in that. That's 6 weeks of group coaching that starts in June. And you'll get the opportunity to ask questions about your circumstances and the things that you've been through and how to overcome and navigate all of that. Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald is another person inside of the group that you'll get access to ask questions as well. So I would definitely check it out. Get interested in it.
Thank you all for tuning into today's episode of Talia Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast with Talia Bombola. Remember, building confidence, self-love, and assertiveness is a journey, and each step you take brings you closer to your goals. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and practical tips to support your personal growth, and head over to my Stand store to sign up for the 21-day self-love challenge. On sale now, and you can also drop a question for Talia and I for the podcast. Until next time, keep embracing your strengths, asserting your boundaries, and living authentically. Take care, and we'll see you next Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast.